thanks for having us talk. It's really interesting to sort of be here today and doing the online seminar format, and I think it's a really good sort of scheme you set up there just so everyone can see what everyone's working on. It's really useful. We thought today we'd talk to you a bit about compassionate technology, which is a sort of project we've been looking at for a little while, but I thought there might be some interesting things here for people to sort of take away and to think about as we sort of go into the future, really. My name's Adam Martin. I am currently the course leader for computer gameplay design and production here at Staffordshire. I sort of grew up in the 80s and 90s, and back then we kind of loaded games on tapes and cartridges and that sort of stuff. But my background's sort of more, I guess, comes from the art side and interactive arts. So I've always had this sort of interest in interesting sort of interfaces and how people sort of interact with computers and things like that. My early part of the career was sort of doing flash games, websites, CD-ROMs. Anyone remember those things? And eventually got a job as a wearable tech researcher. A good while ago now. Got into teaching. I now teach Unreal Engine to our students at Staffordshire, but I've got this long-term interest in brain-computer interfaces, and the picture you can see next to me of the headset on, the one with the person lying down, is actually my undergrad project, which was a sort of homebrew brainwave reading device that I made way back in '99. So yeah, I'll hand over to my colleague.
I'm Jessica. I'm an immersive technologist here at the university. I teach on the VR and AR class at the moment. I've spent a lot of time tinkering with different types of tech, working around with everything from web programming to, things like brain-computer interfaces and making technology that shouldn't talk to each other, talk to each other. I like creating immersive experiences. I like things that are interactive. And my goal is to basically find new ways for us to use immersive tech and virtual reality and things like that without having to rely so much on the things that we have to use controllers for, but getting free of that and focusing more on haptics and free form controls such as hand tracking and gesture tracking. Immersive technology is what we are kind of focused on with this particular project. So when we look at immersive technology, what are we looking at exactly? We're looking at things like virtual spaces, such as interactive cave spaces, like in the picture here, where you've got projectors you can interact with. We're looking at things like virtual reality, augmented reality, and basically exploring any emergent and immersive technology that's coming out. I believe immersive technology allows us to break free of the limitations of what we have within our natural world. It gives us the ability to transcend the boundaries of our human condition, and it allows us to see and share experiences of things that we would otherwise be unable to do. We can each perceive our world in a unique way, and the beauty of using immersive technology such as virtual reality is we can cater to individual perspectives and thus communicate more effectively to each person in the experience. Immersive technology will give us a platform for creating a more personalized experience of the information we are trying to convey and the stories we are trying to tell. Now, when we explore the effects of immersive experiences, we can refer back to Merleau-Ponty and his interpretation of the phenomenology of space. Merleau-Ponty believed that space is one of the fundamental expressions of our presence. A person cannot exist in an external relationship from the world, but they exist because of the relationship between them, the world, and themselves. And this holds true within the immersive experience. The player in a virtual environment exists because of their relationship to that environment, not because of the relationship they have outside of it. So in this sense, immersion is by essence related to the multimodal nature of the perceptual senses. So we have preconceived conceptions of what our world should be, what affordances we have within it, and what agency we can employ. And within immersive technology, such as virtual reality and augmented reality, it allows us to create experiences that reach beyond our current perceptions of our relationships to our environments. It gives us the ability to learn and do things that we normally could not access in our everyday lives. And this is kind of the ethos around the idea of compassionate technology. Now, you might be wondering, what is compassionate technology? I've never heard of this before. And this is basically the way we describe any technology that can be used to improve the way we experience our lives. Or again, the cheesy term is any tech we can use to improve the human condition. And this can be used to enhance the way we experience things like education. So we can create a learning space that is enhanced through personal exploration and discovery or an augmented reality experience. It allows you to take in more information through different types of learning rather than the standard listening, hearing, seeing. You can get in that world and explore it yourself. Um, we can also look at how we can use it for training and for tools. So allowing an in-depth and more detailed view of an activity through simulation using things like augmented reality or mixed reality. In this case, there is a person using a VR headset to explore the intravenous workings of the cranium. I think it's the cranium. No, it's not. It's a hip bone. Doesn't matter. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a technologist. But yeah, so he's using the VR headset to explore something within the body that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise, right? And then you've also got the other side of it, which is using it to enhance things like our personal well-being and enhancing the way that we function within every day. So this is something that where they can provide a way to transform any space to a focus or a study space or a concentration space. This can be done through personalized music playlists based off biometric feedback from tools such as an EEG reader, which will read your brain waves, or an ECG reader, which measures your heart rate. In this case, this is a neurable headset, and it allows the little sensors within the earmuffs to kind of determine whether or not the person using it has I guess they've got better concentration with the music they're listening to versus other music. So it suggests different playlists for different activities. It's actually quite clever. So then we can move on to technology and uses.
Yeah, so technology and uses. So one of the things, particularly as sort of us as game developers, is access to the technology and how to use it. You know, we're not kind of specialist scientists that build the electronics or medical people. We make games and experiences that people can kind of enjoy and explore. So there's some really interesting technologies kind of coming onto the market at the minute. The first image you can see in the top left is more of the kind of heavy duty sort of almost medical grade research headset. It's like a kind of full-on kind of head attachment that you put on with all the sensors and probes and so on that work. But as we go across the grid, so the next one across the top, the guy with the headset on, you can see that it becomes a simpler device. This one is kind of part research, part kind of development and exploration, the emotive epoch system, and it's got a 14-channel EEG reader. They've also got another product, the Insight, which again is a similar device, but again slightly smaller form factor, slightly simpler in terms of what it's measuring, but more accessible to people. And obviously the cost factor is something to consider. And then you can see at the very bottom corner there the MN8 emotive system, which are basically like Bluetooth earbuds. So very, very sort of familiar to what we'd use anyway. People, you know, are not going to kind of feel strange about popping one of these in or a couple of these in to sort of use them. So you've got this kind of progression from a full-on headset right down to just little kind of clip-on earbuds. And I think over time these will kind of get even smaller and more subtle into the future. HP have been doing some interesting work with it as well. So they've got their Omnicept second generation headset here. This has got all the usual sort of virtual reality things in there, you know, stereoscopic vision and tracking and so on. But they've also embedded stuff like eye tracking, pupil dilation, heart rate monitoring, and also a camera to monitor the face so it can detect sort of expressions. This is all fed into some software and machine learning algorithms that basically give us as designers and developers some useful bits of data to work from. So we're not having to kind of crunch the numbers and work out what it actually means. It gives us some stats and information that we can then use to do sort of training applications, well-being, collaborating spaces, all those sorts of interesting things that that you might want to do as an application rather than just sort of raw data. And another really interesting bit of software and hardware that was developed fairly recently was this NextMind system. Now, it was bought and acquired by Snapchat fairly recently, so it's kind of gone a bit dark and sort of behind the scenes. But the technology is really interesting in that the device is mounted on the back of the head, and as people looked at certain objects in this game, in the environment, it would know what you were looking at. So it was kind of like doing eye tracking, but by reading your thoughts in part of the process. So it's a really interesting technology. You look at squares or circles, triangles, it would sort of know what you were looking at, which was kind of really interesting. And I think, you know, whether Snap release it again as a separate product, whether they integrate it into another device, or whether they spin it out again as a separate company, is yet to be seen. But again, it's really, really interesting sort of tech and interesting from, you know, education, well-being side of things as well. hopefully the video is playing. You can see this this image of this guy watching some things flash on the screen. There was a really interesting article in IEEE Spectrum at the end of last year, where it's someone looking at a sort of baggage scan from a sort of X-ray thing at an airport, and what they've been able to do is basically take his brain signals as he's looking at these, and it can spot before he's even aware that there's something dodgy in those cases. So it's a really interesting means, and perhaps the police is a kind of interesting sort of scenario for this. If you're trying to get through a lot of data quickly, how can that be done? And this is a kind of interesting sort of application of these sort of technologies, perhaps going into the future. It does, however, kind of leave us in a bit of a question as to what the workplace of the future might be like. So would we end up in kind of call center scenarios where banks of workers are just kind of used for their pure brain power, not having to think about things, but the technology is kind of sucking the information out of their heads? Is it used in this case, for managers to aggregate information, of course, anonymously, as it says in this one, about their teams, about, how happy the team is, how stressed the team is, that sort of stuff. I really like the quote from the CEO of Emotive there. The dystopian potential of this technology is not lost on us. I think, as a society, we haven't yet kind of grasped that this is possible and where this might lead us in the future. So, yeah, very interesting sort of research area, I suppose.
And while we might be able to use these technologies for evil, we could also use these powers for good, such as using virtual reality and immersive technology in combination with biometric feedback to help rehabilitating a stroke victim, let's say, or helping someone to adjust to an amputation by allowing them to combat phantom limb. We could also use it to combat things like PTSD in our soldiers and our various serving men and women. And this can be done with a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and a virtual reality program. These kind of combinations of the idea of using biometric feedback and using these brain computer interfaces and the gaming environment kind of led us to think, we've got all these interesting tech things to access. We've got all these interesting programs that we work with. We've got access to the data now. What can we do with it? How can we help people? How can we make things better for the the people we see in our everyday lives? And that led us to looking at some of the commercial grade EEG readers, such as the NeuroSky MindWave. For our research, we took on board the NeuroSky MindWave because it is a consumer grade EEG reader. It's got a low cost. It doesn't have a whole lot of channels, but it has enough to be able to get the data that we need. It does all the processing on board, so we don't have to worry about deciphering through 64 channels or 14 channels or 8 channels. Everything is spit out as raw data for us, but it's data that is compartmentalized in a way that we can understand as developers rather than having to bring in a neurologist to decipher those channels ourselves. So we took this into a game experience and we created a game that helped us to establish a baseline for what the mind was doing while it was occupied with a stress inducing task. We needed to access certain information that we wanted to develop gameplay around, and this little project allowed us to do so. It was a simple, like a first person shooter game where meteors would spawn out of the sky, and you would have to shoot them with a snowball. And within this experience, the player was tasked with these things and they were given a little reading bar at the top, a little health bar. So the two basic measurements that we needed to focus on for the stress levels was their attention level, how high was their attention, as well as their meditation, how high or how low was their meditation levels. This is represented by attention is the red bar and blue is the meditation bar. And these things give us kind of an insight into what the player is feeling and thinking while they are performing tasks within the game itself. So when the player was performing an action such as shooting a meteor, and the player was busy, that was the top state there. And it kind of showed that there were even attention and meditation given. When the player was searching for something, looking for a pattern or looking for a pattern within the spawn rate of the meteor so that they could take out a few at a time, their attention levels were really high, and their meditation was a medium space. They were calm, but they were looking for something to do. Then when they got into the flow state where they were just clicking on these meteors, in time, just like they were in the zone, right? Their meditation was really high. They were calm, they were relaxed, they were in control of that situation, and they didn't have to pay attention too much because they were moving almost through like almost a muscle memory kind of thing, instinctual movement. And then finally, we noticed that when the player became overwhelmed with the number of meteors that were being spawned, their attention dropped way low. They couldn't pay attention to anything. They couldn't concentrate. And as well as their meditation level dropped really low, they weren't in a safe space. They didn't feel calm. They didn't feel in control. And it was very interesting to see this readout. Now, we played off of this by making the meteors adjust their spawn rate to this player's state of mind. So if the player was overwhelmed, the spawn rate slowed down. If the player was in the flow, the spawn rate of the meteors maintained consistency. And if they were searching and they were doing too much searching, we sped up the number of meteors that spawned. So this became a dynamically responding game to the player, a more personal experience. This led us to taking those baselines and going, okay, we can see where we can make a player become panicked, but we can also see that flow state where we had them in a complete state of calm and control. This is what we're looking for. This is what we need. We need to find those two measurements and see how we can take one and turn it into the other. And that is where Happy Meadow was born. And Happy Meadow is an EEG reader-based game. It's got a game interface, so it communicates to the user very well, just as well as it creates the space that the developer can read the data to. You go into a field of bunnies, basically as the player. You're in this field of bunnies, and the bunnies are like, dude, you are too stressed out. And why are you stressed out? Because you're lost, right? You don't know where you are. And the bunnies scatter to the four corners of the earth, and you have to calm down and clear your mind and think happy and cozy thoughts in order to get these bunnies to come back out again. And we've got a little video we can play, so you can see kind of what it's doing. Hopefully it's not too loud of sound. It's got sound in there, but hopefully it's not too much. So I'm going to sort of talk over this and kind of explain a bit of what's going on. So you've got the instructions in the game. The bunnies run away. It tells you what's happened. You have to clear your mind and think calm thoughts, and then these bunnies will return. And there's a little blue bar in the top left-hand corner that shows you what your calm level is. So if the bar is really low, the bunnies run away and they make a sound like rustling leaves as they jump into the bushes. And if the bar is really high, then the bunnies are going to come out and stay with you. Now we found that there was a specific number that they had to reach in order for that feeling of calm and control to stay with the user, to stay with the player, which was 11. Once 11 bunnies were achieved, then that was a consistent feeling. And when they turned the game off, they continued to feel calm and I guess, relaxed. But the other interesting thing that came out of the project was people came back to play it multiple times. And they started saying things like, because of this game, I now recognize when I feel stressed. And because of the things I learned about how to calm myself down in this game, I now know what I need to think about when I feel stressed out at work or when I feel stressed on the way to class. And we had everything from people saying that they thought of playing with their pets or playing with their dog, to getting a hug, to thinking about that moment before they fell asleep. Or in the case of one young man who played the game, he said he thought of his favorite wrestler and that would make him feel calm and relaxed. And whenever he would get stressed out at school, he would take a moment and think about this wrestler. So we thought that was a really interesting outcome for the project and something that we could take forward. And that kind of brings us to the idea of the Happy Meadow project and how we can use this technology in the future. We're looking at improving mental health through collaboration. We want to do a call to action to get people involved in doing more BCI and game-based collaborative projects. We want to create content that addresses many forms of anxiety, depression, and stress. And we're hoping that by providing something that it's not treatment, but it's like a stopgap in between that moment when you realize you're stressed out and you need help and that moment where you actually get to see a professional, right? We want to create these little experiences in the hopes of helping to reduce the number of cases of mental health crisis by providing that immediate, safe, and repeatable access to something like a stress management tool. And we believe that this project acts as evidence that immersive technology can be an efficacious platform for providing support and promoting mental health and wellness.